Today's session is pretty quick, short, sweet, and simple, packed with feeding hacks for your toddler. So hopefully you guys will leave this session on some great hacks on how to support toddler feeding, some things that maybe you've never thought about, or some things maybe that you're like, I already do that, awesome. So if you have not been on any of our webinars previously, my name is Lauren. So Child Care Answers is part of a larger network of resource and referral agencies. We support Marion, Hendricks, and Hamilton counties, but there is an agency that provides support and resources to every county in Indiana. While we all do the same core things, our work looks just slightly different, but we are all available to support you. So let's get into just some general guidelines when it comes to feeding toddlers before I jump into hacks. So with toddlers, the toddler years are really all about exploration and discovery. They're trying to figure out how the world works and what their role is inside of the world. So you may find your child in the toddler years starts to become a picky eater, or they explore food in a different way that they weren't exploring before as an infant. And all of that is super normal because of how toddlers are approaching the world. So the best thing to do with toddlers is just to offer a variety of foods from all the food groups, different textures, different colors, different tastes, so that they have that opportunity to explore flavor and kind of figure out what they like and what they don't like. As parents, we get to decide what foods are offered, when they're offered, and where they're offered. But our child's job is to decide what is eaten from that. So we can never force a child to eat anything. We provide the options, and then they eat if they're hungry. This may mean toddlers are eating more than you could ever imagine they could fit inside of their little body. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, they are not eating anything, and you're like, are you even going to grow because you are not eating anything? And both of those are normal and typical. Oftentimes we see that swing just throughout the day. And toddlers very much eat what their body needs. So you may see a toddler carb load in the morning and they're only eating their carbs on their plate. They're not eating anything else. And then in the evening, maybe they're eating all of their protein, or all of their vegetables, or all of their fruit. And again, that's typical. So still giving it to them, but knowing that eating is not ours to control. Also, for our toddlers, we still need to continue cutting up foods like grapes and hot dogs because choking is still a concern. In the infant years, the only food that's off limits to infants is honey. And you can introduce honey now to toddlers. There is no food that is off limits. It just kind of depends sometimes on the way that it's presented. So carrots, cooking carrots rather than giving them a whole carrot, or giving them like the shaved carrots rather than a carrot because of that choking hazard. So there's no food that's off limits. It's just the way that it's presented to them. We never want to force children to eat food they don't like. I'm going to talk to you in a couple of slides about the 75-25 rule on supporting children and trying new foods and supporting picky eaters, but we never want to force them to eat. So throw out your old mentality of the clean plate club or eating to earn dessert, because those methods have actually caused unhealthy habits around eating. And there is more on that on our Mealtime Basics page, as well as how to engage in that conversation with grandparents. And then lastly, toddlers should be eating about 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. So if you're trying to figure out like, what should my child be eating and how often should they be eating, as they transition from an infant to a toddler, expect them to eat 3 meals, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then 2 snacks. So a snack between breakfast and lunch, and then another snack before dinner. And then cutting their milk intake down to about 16 ounces a day. And that is milk or milk alternative. It doesn't really matter what kind of milk they're getting. It's all about just giving them calcium. So that is kind of our general guidelines. And now I'll move into hacks. So our first hack, which I don't know if it's really a hack, but just something to keep in mind, is to really encourage self-feeding. Self-feeding is super important. Children are more likely to eat something if they're feeding themselves. So encourage them to have that independence and to be able to self-feed. Self-feeding really begins in infancy and carries over through the toddler years. So giving them a lot of opportunities to practice eating themselves, starting with hand feeding and then introducing utensils, providing a sippy cup for them to drink their own liquids, transitioning to a straw cup pretty early. The straw uses a different mouth motion than a sippy cup, so it's actually better than a sippy, giving them that independence to be able to drink on their own. And then expecting a mess. So part of encouraging self-feeding is that they're gonna make a mess. Like this kiddo in the picture is eating a bowl of cereal. It's going to be messy, but that's part of the learning process. And remember, our toddlers are learning about the world through exploration and discovery. So if they don't have those opportunities to feed themselves, we're really taking away that exploration and discovery piece from them. So self-feeding does make a mess, but create an environment where that's okay. So I might be giving my child yogurt, knowing that every time they put it in their mouth, it's going to fall onto their lap. So I might mix some granola or some cereal in with the yogurt to kind of beef it up a little bit so that when they do put it on their spoon, it stays there. So think about ways that you can encourage self-feeding while also being okay with the mess. And when you're preparing foods for them to self-feed, I find it super helpful to cut all of their food with scissors. So using scissors is so much easier than cutting with a knife and a fork or a pizza cutter. It cuts it up into the smallest bits that you would want, and it's just so much easier and more efficient. You can also get scissors for your diaper bag to travel with so that you always have them out on a dinner out. And it's just really helpful. So I learned this trick when I was teaching infants, and I never stopped. My kids are 4 and 8, and I still cut up their food with scissors, especially like on pizza night and things like that. It's easier than using a pizza cutter. So my next hack is the 75-25 rule for picky eaters. So toddlers are picky. They go from eating everything as an infant to then having opinions and ideas about what they want to eat as a toddler. Again, toddlers are learning how to be independent. They're learning how to be individuals, and that I have likes and dislikes that are different than my parents, different than my siblings, different than my friends, and that they're learning to respect and understand those differences. So with that comes the toddler who is kind of refusing to eat foods, maybe even refusing to eat certain food groups, refusing to eat foods that they used to love, or having strong preferences for certain foods. And so using the 75-25 rule allows toddlers and older children, I still use this again with my 4 and 8-year-old, to experience different foods that you probably aren't going to see them eat, but it continues to expose them to them. So we put 75% of the food on the plate as a preferred food, a food you know that they're going to eat, but is still healthy. In this picture, it's the meatballs, the watermelon, and the puffs. And then 25% of their plate are non-preferred foods. So in this picture, it's the broccoli and cauliflower. The goal is that the child will explore the broccoli and cauliflower. And that does not necessarily mean eating it. What we really want is for them to touch it, to put it to their lips, to smell it, to lick it, all before they ever taste that food. Knowing that we need to be exposed to foods 10 to 15 times, sometimes before we ever take a bite of it or get comfortable with that food. So I'm putting this on their plate, knowing they're not going to eat it, but just exposing it to them, hoping that over time, they start to kind of explore it, taste it, smell it, touch it, all of that. This also works for kids with sensory issues around food when we're giving them non-preferred textures, encouraging them to try new things and branch out. What's helpful is putting that non-preferred food on your plate. So as a parent, I never serve my kids food that is not on my plate too. I'm not going to make them eat something that I wouldn't eat myself. And being that model is showing them that this food is good. As my son, who's 8, starts to explore newer foods, he's definitely become more open within the last year to eating foods that were non-preferred foods before now. His sister is starting to get curious about foods in a different way because she sees him eating those foods and is like, maybe they aren't so bad, because she has made the decision before she ever touches it, tastes it, smells it, that it's a no-go. And so his curiosity with foods is helping her be more curious about foods as well. And so some other ways of helping our toddlers try new foods alongside of the 25-75 rule is really about relaxing when it comes to food. It's providing options and allowing our child to explore them, whether it's touching, kissing, licking, physically manipulating the food without ever trying it, continuing to offer it, offering it in new and exciting ways. So maybe adding cheese to it or adding a special spice or a dipping sauce, putting in fun little toothpicks into the food to make it exciting. But just trying different ways of introducing that food to your child. Using food bridges, so things that you know they like incorporated into like a non-preferred food. So maybe adding a non-preferred food into a dip that they already like, or adding it into a food, maybe blending it, adding it in a different way and making it fun. So one of those things, like I mentioned, is to really mix it up. So try foods in a new way. So adding fresh herbs and spices to foods. I know as an adult that I prefer vegetables when they're roasted with a fresh herb than eating it steamed or canned or raw. It's just a different way of eating things and I like it better. Growing up, I hated green beans until my mom realized that I liked fresh green beans right out of the garden. So she would pick green beans, she would give me mine raw, and she would cook everybody else's. So preparing food in a different way. My son loves peppers, like sweet peppers, but he doesn't like them cooked. So as I'm preparing peppers to cook and add to a meal, I'll leave some on his plate that are raw. Offering foods frozen. This is really helpful for toddlers who are teething and cutting those molars, is giving them things like peas, carrots, blueberries, mini pancakes, bagels in the frozen form, and really good for a hot day. For a long time, my kids never knew that peas were cooked because the only time that they were offered peas was when I would take a handful of frozen peas and throw them on their tray, and they would eat them frozen. I like to buy things at the grocery store that makes my job easier as a parent. So buying the frozen peas with the cubed carrots and throwing them frozen on their tray was super easy for me. I also would throw a handful of peas into mac and cheese to help cool it down. So for a long time, they didn't know that mac and cheese didn't come with peas inside of it. It's just kind of what went together. So mixing it up and adding things differently to foods can help entice them to try new things. And I'm sorry, but peas inside of mac and cheese is a lot more enticing than just some peas on a tray. Frozen peas, also more enticing than cooked peas. And then toddlers like their things separate. And so deconstructing the adult meal can be more enticing to a toddler than putting it all together. So maybe it's taco night. And instead of making my child a taco, I'm going to give them all of the components, but separate on their plate so that they can see and feel and manipulate all of those components as separate things. So that might mean that my toddler is given a deconstructed taco, but my 5-year-old is given a regular taco, or given the choice between the two. And so here are a couple ideas of ways that we can just deconstruct their meal when ours might be constructed. And this really doesn't take much extra time. And sometimes it's easier just to throw a bunch of different things on their plate than trying to make components fit together. So putting some meat and some sour cream, beans and avocado on their tray, giving them just a small piece of tortilla, even encouraging them to make their own taco, giving them that independence over their meal, some family style dining. And again, you'll see in the barbecue, the BLT, and the chicken salad, how it's all kind of deconstructed. The chicken salad is nice because not a lot of young children like that mayonnaise-based chicken salad, but they may prefer to dip their chicken in ranch or ketchup. And so this is still giving them all of those components in a way that you know that they're going to eat it and maybe try new things. Which takes me to dips. Who doesn't love a good dip? Especially a toddler loves a good dip. My daughter, one of her very first words was dip, and she would point at her tray during mealtime and go dip, 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 dip. And if we got a dip and did not share that dip with her, she was very offended. And now she judges restaurants off of their cheese sauce. She only wants to go places that have queso or cheese sauce because she likes a good dip. So here are some ideas of some healthy dip ideas for young kiddos. Sometimes good old ketchup or bottled ranch is all they need. But if you want to offer some variety when it comes to dips, making an easy ranch with Greek yogurt, lemon juice, and herbs. And then you can turn it into a tzatziki sauce by adding cucumber. A yogurt dip for fruit, including yogurt, honey, lemon juice, and lemon zest. This is a great way of introducing honey into their diet that they may not have had before. And then an easy guacamole can just be as simple as adding a little lime juice to avocado, and then you can add different things to it. I love guacamole because you can change it up and use whatever you have on hand. My son, as a toddler, was obsessed with guacamole. He would always steal my guacamole at Chipotle. I'd have to give him his own side. Now he wouldn't touch it, but it was something that he loved as a toddler. We do have a question in the chat about using separate compartment plates. That is completely up to the child. So you know your child best, and you know what they need. Some really prefer the separation. Others just like it separate on their plate and not all combined. My kids do better with like a larger meal on a separate plate, even at 4 and 8. But like a snack or a lunch, I usually use a smaller plate where they're all together. It kind of depends on what I'm serving as well. So that is up to you. It's not obviously required. Some kids are totally fine without it. Some like really prefer that and need that separation. I also think my husband would love a separate plate with the compartments if I had them for him. So it just kind of depends on the person, but great question. Muffin ideas. So a great way of getting toddlers nutrients and trying a variety of foods is by making muffins. Toddlers are carb loaders. They love carbs. And so muffins are carbs. But there are so many things that we can change and add to a muffin to make it healthy and enticing. So this is a recipe for mini applesauce muffins using applesauce and egg. If you have children with egg allergies, you can just up the applesauce. This recipe allows you to adjust the oil in the milk for plant-based milks, and then coconut oil, butter, other oil alternatives, and then introducing flour and cinnamon and apple into the muffin. What I love about this recipe too is it's really easy to adjust the flour. So if your child's gluten-free or needs a different kind of flour to add whole wheat flour, it has that ability to add different things into it, including pumpkin muffins. Pumpkin muffins are pretty much the same as the apple muffins, just with the addition of pumpkin instead. And same with blueberry and banana muffins. It's just changing kind of one ingredient and offering it a little bit differently. There's also a recipe for chocolate muffins with oats, because who doesn't love a good dessert muffin, but it's still healthy for them. And then I did throw in there a veggie muffin as well. This is a great alternative for breakfast with a lot of egg in it. and as well as cheese, so getting them that dairy, and then some vegetables embedded in here. I do find that kiddos are more inclined to eat those strong flavored vegetables like broccoli if it's mixed in with something. So coating it in Parmesan cheese and then roasting it or adding it to a muffin like this is more enticing for them than just offering some steamed broccoli. So you can find those again all on the Mealtime Basics page through our resource center by scanning the QR code. And then lastly, just kind of wanted to wrap things up and think about those hacks that you are like, I'm so excited about this, I'm gonna try this, or even adding additional hacks that you do that I didn't talk about that you're like, you guys should all try this. Yeah, so how to keep introducing new foods. So when your child is like, no, I'm not eating that, how to keep trying and not feel defeated by that, and that it's okay. That expectation being removed of like, my kid has to eat this, or I need you to try a bite of this, taking that pressure away from mealtime and just continuing to introduce. One day they'll try it. Yeah, deconstructing the meal. Tom says that sounds like it's something that will work well for his kiddos. I like deconstructing their meal, but then giving them that option to then reconstruct it themselves, or to make it look like ours, or make it look the way that they want, giving them kind of control over their meal. Yeah. And sometimes rethinking the way that we approach mealtime may not align with all of the different caregivers in our kids' lives. Have conversations with grandparents or other caregivers who may still be forcing kids to finish their plate or saving dessert until the end of the meal. Just kind of changing the narrative on creating healthy eating habits with our kiddos and how that actually creates unhealthy eating habits. And so things like keeping, having to finish your plate to earn dessert creates power around the dessert, which then gives that food more points or more leverage than the food on their plate. And so putting everything together on their plate, including their dessert, shows kiddos that like all of these foods are just foods, and it takes the power away, which creates, again, healthy eating habits. It is amazing how young kiddos self-regulate their eating, that they will take one bite of something and then be like, I'm done, I'm not hungry anymore, or they'll leave food on their plate, and how we as adults have not learned those skills, or we have unlearned those skills and we're forcing us to finish our food, and then we feel sick after meals. And there's a lot around eating that I wish I could learn from a toddler. Awesome. I appreciate you being on our workshop today. I know it was a fast one, just a 30-minute, quick, hard-hitting toddler hacks, but hopefully you're leaving today with some great information.